Chwet, hwe gardina, in yeor dagum theodcynning a frimga frunon, hu tha ethalingas elen frimedon. Of shield shaving sheathan a threitum moniga myrdum, merosetla of Tyr exodeolas. I believe that's how it runs. I first heard those lines uttered by Benjamin Bagby in 2011. His wonderful rendition of stirring rendition of the opening of Beowulf. So the spear Danes in days gone by, and the kings who ruled them had courage and greatness. We have heard of those princes' heroic campaigns. This, strangely, is my first reading of Beowulf. Completed it not too long ago, about a week ago or so. Very strange given that I've read works such as, well, of course, Tolkien would be the primary example. Tolkien and his Legendarium. Tolkien was obviously a scholar of Old English. He translated Beowulf, of course. I've read E.R. Edison's The Worm Ouroboros, Morris's The Wood Beyond the World, Paul Anderson's Broken Sword, compendiums on Germanic mythology, Norse mythology. It's all there. And yet I've done Zany's pagan mythology, inflected by Norse fatalism, that sort of thing. And so it's very strange. I think it took me such a long time to read Beowulf because, of course, one builds these great texts up in one's mind. It can be very difficult to get into a work when there's so much weight behind it. And you feel that it requires so many prerequisites. There's so much that you need to learn, and there's so much background that is necessary to understand before you can sit down and read it. It's not always the case, and I would say that you don't necessarily need to have a great understanding of Anglo-Saxon history or Norse mythology to read Beowulf. It's actually fairly simple. Once you've read the Silmarillion or the Iliad or that kind of work, it's not actually that difficult to read, especially in a modern translation like Seamus Heaney's. On that point, actually, I read Seamus Heaney's translation because I just wanted to get into Beowulf. I didn't want the baggage of Tolkien and his prose translation. My primary goal was to read John Gardner's Grendel. I actually bought John Gardner's Grendel as a standalone book, and I was going to just read it without any understanding of Beowulf. Obviously, I'm aware of Grendel and the dragon and all manner of things that I've learned over the years about Beowulf, but I hadn't actually sat down to read it, of course. So I was going to read Grendel, but I thought I'm going to miss something here. I'm not going to be able to appreciate Gardner's book with if I've not read the original source text, Beowulf. So I decided, why not finally read Beowulf? And indeed, I'm just thinking there have been strange confluence of things that have made me finally decide to read this. I went to Denmark, of course, and went to various Viking museums there. That was an interesting thing. And I also went to the British Library recently. It was to see some. I went to London to see some colleagues at the Ecological Citizen, and then I just happened to meet one colleague at the British Library, where I saw the original unique manuscript of Beowulf. So I felt like I must surely read Beowulf at this point. And indeed, strangely, although I wasn't a fan of the film at the time, I remember seeing the original animated Beowulf, and I think the song, that one song in that film has always stuck with me. Just wait, the white he may roam. Always a hero comes home. I've always remembered that. I didn't enjoy the film that much. It was a long time ago that it came out, of course. So that song in the film, plus memorizing the Old English opening to Beowulf, it seems strange that I haven't read Beowulf, and I've finally done it. At the start of this reading, I had to force myself to read it. I had to force myself to read Beowulf because I've moved away. I go through cycles of the kind of literature that I read, but I have moved away from this type of work, broadly construed, anything relating to swords and boasts and heroic deeds and battles and all that kind of thing. It's not something I particularly write, aside from my shared fantasy narratives, Arturus, but that's very rare nowadays. I tend to read literary fiction. I hate that term, but literary fiction, or it will be something like magical realism or weird fiction, that kind of thing. And so we're really going back to almost to the start of the channel, the origins of this channel, when it was called Oldenword Books. And again, all those books that I mentioned previously used to feature. And so it was a strange thing. I felt a little bit of strain, a little bit of tension in reading this. Maybe I've just I've had my fill for quite a long time of oaths and lineages and chronicles and all that kind of thing. One tires of it eventually, I think, and that's actually one of the reasons why I don't have as much time for Tolkien as you might think I have. I find it difficult to always engage. Beowulf is an Old English poem written circa 8th century to the 11th century by an unknown Christian scholar. It's a strange work. It's a hybrid, almost liminal work, in that it's blending a Christian worldview, an early Christian worldview, with a still pagan worldview. The author, in his newly Christian framing, his newly Christian convictions, puts into the mouths of pagans Christian sentiments. It's a text that it also crosses national boundaries as well. The Christian writer is extending his imagination to the northeast. The story takes place in Denmark primarily, and partly in Sweden, or Geatland as it was then known. I believe it's part of southern Sweden. Geatland being the home of the eponymous hero Beowulf, and Denmark being the home of Hrothgar, the king, the ring giver, the king of the Danes. So it's very much a work of blending, of liminality. It's a hybrid work. Readers of Tolkien will be aware of the complicated interface between the pagan heroic code and the Christian moral consciousness. A good way to think about Beowulf is that it's really, although there are a profusion, a preponderance of names and stories within stories, a collection of different tales within tales that speak about the foundations of certain kingdoms and feuds and all manner of things. It's actually a very simple structure. It's 3 monsters and 3 confrontations in one arc, essentially one arc of life. I feel like I can say these things in that it's Beowulf. I'm not going to spoil it. Grendel comes in the first sort of phase. You can really summarize that as chaos embodied by Grendel. This creature who is scorned by society. He is fundamentally isolated. He represents the chaotic wild. He's a rim walker. He's someone outside of the known. Then a powerful demon, a prowler through the dark, nursed the hard grievance. It harrowed him to hear the din of the loud banquet every day in the hall, the harp being struck, and the clear song of a skilled poet telling with mastery of man's beginnings, how the Almighty had made the earth, a gleaming plain girdled with waters. In his splendour he set the sun and the moon to be earth's lamplight, lanterns for men, and filled the broad lap of the world with branches and leaves and quickened life in every other thing that moved. I've written just here in my notes, Grendel is really associated with the chthonic, nature, darkness, solitude. And I'm comparing this to the order of men, the bright, the loud, the heavenly, mirth, striving, all that kind of thing. Of course, it's much more complicated than that, but that gets the gist of it across, I think. So Grendel is this figure of chaos. He's outside the known. He's scorned by society. Because in this text, he is the offspring of Cain. You can see here that the Christian writer is talking about the Almighty. So it's a pagan world, but he's fundamentally shifting things. He's transmogrifying things. He's explaining Grendel through a Christian worldview. So Grendel ruled in defiance of right, one against all, until the greatest house in the world stood empty, a deserted wallstead. For 12 winters, seasons of woe, the Lord of the Shielding suffered under his load of sorrow. And so, before long, the news was known over the whole world. Sad lays were sung about the beset king, the vicious raids and ravages of Grendel, his long and unrelenting feud, nothing but war. How he would never parley or make peace with any Dane, nor stop his death-dealing, nor pay the death price. No counsellor could ever expect fair reparation from those rabid hands. All were endangered, young and old, were hunted down by that dark death shadow, who lurked and swooped in the long nights on the misty moors. Nobody knows where these reavers from hell roam on their errands. This great hero, Beowulf, comes into play. Indeed, it almost feels like chess pieces. There's a lot here about fate. There's a lot here about the great flow of time. And before I get into that in further detail, Beowulf is this figure who comes to the aid of Hrothgar and his Danish men from Geatland. This figure who apparently has a strength of 30 thanes. This almost a caricature of a hero, rippling muscles, blonde hair, steely gaze. He's someone who can swim across a vast ocean, slaying sea beasts and things like this. He is the quintessential hero. He works by the warrior code. He's not afraid of death. He has courage in the face of death. One of the most important aspects of the pagan heroic warrior code is, of course, reputation. I believe it's called loth. This idea of doing great deeds no matter the cost in order to gain immortality. And there is also endurance in the great sway of fate, or weird. The fate of the Norns and the Norse worldview. So Beowulf comes across from Geatland to help out Hrothgar, and there's already a sense early on, I think, of really the core, the absolute core, the essence of Beowulf, which is fundamentally, again, this almost fatalistic understanding or perception of the world. Death is inevitable. It comes to us all, and yet there is endurance in this fact. Even when the heroic warrior is going out to gain his glory and to solidify his reputation, there is this idea that glory fades, and there's this strange sense in which the Christian writer is remembering this. He's inflecting this throughout the text. There's also it's also fused with the idea of providence in the Christian worldview as well. But yes, Beowulf comes over the sea, and very early on in the text kills Grendel. He kills chaos. I had a modern expectation of how this was going to play out, this battle. I actually, again, not having read Beowulf, I thought it was going to be a long and developed conflict between Grendel and Beowulf. It wasn't. Beowulf comes in the very first night, the very first meeting. Beowulf, well, I will read the text. Sinews split and the bone lappings burst. Beowulf was granted the glory of winning. Grendel was driven under the fen banks, fatally hurt, to his desolate lair. His days were numbered. The end of his life was coming over him, he knew it for certain, and one bloody clash had fulfilled the dearest wishes of the Danes. The man who had lately landed among them, proud and sure, had purged the hall, kept it from harm. He was happy with his night work and the courage he had shown. The Geat captain had boldly fulfilled his boast to the Danes. He had healed and relieved a huge distress, unremitting humiliations, the hard fate they had been forced to undergo, no small affliction. Clear proof of this could be seen in the hand the hero displayed high up near the roof, the whole of Grendel's shoulder and arm, his awesome grasp. Beowulf tears off Grendel's arm, and Grendel is forced to flee, and there, out in the wilderness, perishes. And so the second phase begins. Grendel's mother, this strange almost... That Grendel's mother is a creature that I've never been able to pin down. I think that's quite appropriate given that she definitely has this amorphous character. She's almost like a swamp hag. And yet also in the film, in the original film, the animated film, she's quite seductive, of course. For some reason, she's played by Angelina Jolie. And there are vastly differing interpretations there, I think. In Grendel, as we will see, she definitely has a quite a unique characterization. Grendel's mother takes her revenge. She avenges her son by undergoing a night raid at Heorot, Hrothgar's hall. Beowulf got ready, donned his war gear, indifferent to death. His mighty hand-forged, fine-webbed mail would soon meet with the menace underwater. It would keep the bone cage of his body safe. No enemy's clasp could crush him in it. No vicious arm lock choke his life out. So Grendel's mother faces Beowulf underwater in this strange, otherworldly, chthonic realm under a pool filled with strange fire snakes. And again, events play out with a sense of weight, almost in a mechanical way. Despite Beowulf's heroic striving, it feels inevitable. It's the inexorable flow of events. Beowulf is he strides out into this strange outer land. This outland. And yet it's almost as if Grendel's mother is waiting for him. And so, a battle underwater, an outlandish lair, in an outlandish lair. And here, actually, Beowulf feels his first sense of peril, and he almost perishes. But of course, he's doomed to survive. And so, the second phase of Beowulf is really, it's about vengeance. Vengeance and blood feud. Then, with sudden dispatch, the vehement mother avenged her son, and wrought destruction. Death had robbed her, Geats had slain Grendel, so his ghastly dam struck back, and with barefaced defiance laid a man low. Thus life departed from the sage Aesir, an elder wise in council. But afterwards, on the morning following, the Danes could not burn the dead body, nor lay the remains of the man they loved on his funeral pyre. She had fled with the corpse, and taken refuge beneath torrents on the mountain. It was a hard blow for Hrothgar to bear, harder than any he had undergone before. And so the heart-sore king besought me in your royal name to take my chances under water, to win glory and prove my worth. He promised me rewards. Hence, as is well known, I went to my encounter with the terrormonger at the bottom of the tarn. For a while it was hand to hand between us, then blood went curling along the currents, and I beheaded Grendel's mother in the hall with a mighty sword. I barely managed to escape with my life. My time had not yet come. But Halfdane's heir, the shelter of those earls, again endowed me with a multitude of gifts. So speaks Beowulf to Hygelac, his his lord in Geatland. Having fulfilled his deeds, killing Grendel and Grendel's mother. And so we move now to the last part of the story. This is where my interest in Beowulf has really peaked, in fact. I will say I was reading for Grendel and slightly disappointed that Grendel's episode was very brief. As I read, I became more and more interested, more and more touched by the melancholy tone of this work. Simultaneously a work of great heroism and yet also deep, deep melancholy. The third phase of Beowulf is really concerning the dragon. And the main themes here are mortality and, again, that sense of fate, of weird. The story moves from youthful heroism to mature kingship. And indeed, point to note is that after Beowulf returns to Geatland, many, many years pass, he becomes a king of high renown, unrivaled in deeds and honour. But his time comes to face the dragon, and there is something so deeply... It reminds me of the sadness I felt when reading The Children of Hurin, for example. It's a really tragic end. Things move. It's almost the rolling sands of time. And everything must fade. Everything must come to pass. The wide kingdom reverted to Beowulf. He ruled it well for 50 winters, grew old and wise as warden of the land, until one began to dominate the dark, a dragon on the prowl, from the steep vaults of a stone-roofed barrow where he guards a hoard. There was a hidden passage unknown to men, but someone managed to enter by it, and interfere with the heathen trove. Clearly, there is a lot here in Beowulf's dragon that relates to, or has some influence on Smaug in The Hobbit. So as I say, the end of Beowulf is actually surprisingly melancholy. It's very touching. Beowulf goes out to fight the dragon by himself. He realises that he's essentially preparing for death. It's his last act in the world. It's really about the loneliness of leadership. He's an island. This great figure, despite all of his deeds and all of his connections, he's an island. It really is the loneliness of leadership in that as he goes out to fight the dragon in its cave on the cliffs, on the coast, his men are too frightened. Beowulf tells his men not to interfere. He goes with a party of warriors to defeat the dragon. But the dragon is too much of he's met his match, essentially. Only one of the warriors in the party comes to his help, a man called Wiglaf. He reminded me of, he has that courage, that bold sort of inner courage of Samwise. Wiglaf, this warrior who, as Beowulf is fighting the dragon inside the caverns, Wiglaf, standing outside with the other men, he says, "This isn't right. We should be helping our lord Beowulf, the captain of the Geats, the king of the Geats, and we should come to his aid, even though he told us to stand aside." And Wiglaf actually does take part in the battle with Beowulf. And so he's the only, all of the rest of the party are cowards. He is the only one who goes to face the dragon. "Men at arms, remain here on the barrow, safe in your armour, to see which one of us is better in the end at bearing wounds in a deadly fray. This fight is not yours, nor is it up to any man except me to measure his strength against the monster, or to prove his worth. I shall win the gold by my courage, or else mortal combat, doom of battle, will bear your lord away." Then he drew himself up beside his shield. The fabled warrior in his war shirt and helmet trusted in his own strength entirely, and went under the crag. No coward path. It's a very sad part of the end of Beowulf, in which he's sitting alone, dying from his wounds on the cliff. "To the everlasting Lord of all, to the King of glory, I give thanks that I behold this treasure here in front of me, that I have thus been allowed to leave my people so well endowed on the day I die. Now that I have bartered my last breath to own this fortune, it is up to you to look after their needs, I can hold out no longer. Order my troop to construct a barrow on a headland on the coast after my pyre has cooled. It will loom on the horizon at Hronsness and be a reminder among my people, so that in coming times crews under sail will call it Beowulf's barrow, as he steers ships across the wide and shrouded waters. And the story becomes ever more melancholy, and the people work to honour their king. We must hurry now to take a last look at the king and launch him, lord and lavisher of rings, on the funeral road. His royal pyre will melt no small amount of gold. Heaped there in a hoard, it was bought at heavy cost, and that pile of rings he paid for at the end with his own life will go up with the flame, be furrowed in fire. Treasure no follower will wear in his memory, nor lovely woman link and attach as a torque around her neck. But often, repeatedly, in the path of exile they shall walk bereft, bowed under woe, now that their leader's laugh is silenced, high spirits quenched. Many a spear, dawn cold to the touch, will be taken down and waved on high. The swept harp won't waken warriors, but the raven winging darkly over the doomed will have news, tidings for the eagle of how he hawked and ate, how he and the wolf made short work of the dead. The Geat people built a pyre for Beowulf, stacked and decked it until it stood 4 square, hung with helmets, heavy war shields and shining armour, just as he had ordered. Then his warriors laid him in the middle of it, mourning a lord far famed and beloved. On a height they kindled the hugest of all funeral fires. Fumes of wood smoke billowed darkly up. The blaze roared and drowned out their weeping. Wind died down, and flames wrought havoc in the hot bone house, burning it to the core. They were disconsolate, and wailed aloud for their lord's decease. A Geat woman too sang out in grief, with hair bound up. She unburdened herself of her worst fears, a wild litany of nightmare and lament. Her nation invaded, enemies on the rampage, bodies in piles, slavery and abasement. Heaven swallowed the smoke. A work of many, it's a work of, again, a hybrid work, a liminal work, melding heroism and fatalism, darkness and light, hope and joy, but also sorrow and doubt. It's for that reason a work of world literature. It's Beowulf.